Okay. So Professor Liu, as you have shared during the lecture, participatory planning processes usually involves quite a bit of face-to-face interactions, even going down to the personal level. For example, telling of stories is even part of the process, as you have shared. But at the same time, in today's age, technology has become more and more part of our everyday lives. So could you share with us if you think technology is a boon or bane to participatory planning processes?
Okay, I think there are several points about this. Years ago, almost 50 years ago, one of my professors at UC Berkeley, he wrote a book regarding this point. And he was saying the future, people don't need to talk to each other face to face. We're going to develop all this new technology and it will be a new kind of community, right? It's a new community, not based on face-to-face communication. And in fact, that's where we are now today. So, but if you look at what we have today, cell phone and internet and all this stuff, whether it's hindering or whether it's actually potentially helpful to participation, I think is remains to be seen at this point. The negative part, a family having dinner together and all the kids are playing their handphone, playing games, and there's no communication at all. Certainly that's not good, right? That's not very good. But the positive side is that some public issues, such as environmental protection, air pollution, or even shared common issues, which might be somewhere else, could benefit a great deal by this instant connectivity and connection with each other. So I think there's positive and negative sides of technology, and we need to be fairly careful in selecting appropriately how to use it. And in our work in participation, we are using it in many instances. We're using teleconferencing so that you can see somebody else somewhere else. All of that is helpful, I think.
Well, I guess it just goes to show that there's two sides to everything.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
But we need to be more aware of what technology does to us.
Yeah.
We need to project a little bit. We need to be able to kind of see its potential consequences.
Mm-hmm. So, in the lecture, you have mentioned that the development of participatory planning processes in Taiwan, it was happened in tandem with some of the democratic reforms in Taiwan.
Yes.
But recently, in cities like Shenzhen, they have also started to experiment with more collaborative planning processes, and that happened without parallel democratic reforms. So, so my question to you is whether democratization is a necessary condition for participatory planning to develop, and conversely, whether participatory planning can happen without democracy.
That's a good question. The Shenzhen case, I would think, I'm not familiar with it that much, but I would think that the more they use collaboration and participation in doing some public, dealing with some public issues, the more likely they will move towards democratization, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that democracy depends on participation, right? That's for the Shenzhen case, probably. I'm guessing because I don't know enough about it. But vice versa is also true. That is, you do need political democratization in order for participation to work well. In other words, at other fronts, who represents you in what forum, if it becomes more democratic, right? If you have more public say, decision making on who will actually represent you. Or, for example, if you have more citizen participation in the decision about what you do with your budget. There's quite a bit of work on participatory budgeting and kinds of things. If you have that going, I think it will also improve the quality of participatory planning. So it's kind of, it goes hand in hand to me. It's two sides of the same coin, kind of.
So recently in Singapore, there has been more and more interest in participatory planning processes, more and more desire for more collaborative form of planning. But at the same time, a lot of people have pointed out that the general attitude in Singapore among Singaporeans is that, especially for community issues, the general attitude tends towards apathy. So, in your opinion, do you think apathy is an obstacle towards more participation in planning?
Yeah, we often are faced with this situation. But over the years, my thinking about this is that apathy occurs at different levels. One level might be you're pretty much satisfied with what you have, right? And you can't really pick problems or pick issues. So you say, okay, everything is fine, right? And I don't have much complaint. And that's a kind of acceptance of the situation based on some level of satisfaction. You can say that's apathy, but maybe it's another kind of feeling that leads to no response or no reaction, right? Then there's a kind of apathy that comes from lack of really knowledge or information. You don't know what's happening you don't know what the policies are, and you kind of say, oh, I don't know much about it, and I'm too busy, and I don't have time to get involved, and that's quite common. And along with that, there's a sense that we leave it to the experts, right? The things that you're talking about is too professional, or you guys deal with it. And I trust you.
Yeah.
That's a form of apathy. Not necessarily all that negative, I would say, because it's a kind of a mutual trust. You can't say too much about that. But behind that is that perhaps issues and information is not transparent, it's not open. You don't make an effort to let people know what is happening in your neighborhood, in your community, and as a result, they say, "Okay, I trust you. You take care of it." Right? That's the third kind of apathy is that you know what's wrong and you have problems. You have tried before. Nothing happens. Nobody comes to help you, and the officials are avoiding you, and you get discouraged. Right? That's kind of pretty clear. That's kind of a negative kind of feeling. Right? So I think there are different levels of apathy, and I think in most situations, all three exist to some extent. Right? So if we break the problem down and try to focus on each one separately, and try to figure out how to deal with it, maybe we can. For example, when people come to us and say, "Don't bother us. You know best. You just do it," we would not give up. Right? We would persist or pursue that. Right? We would try to go around and try to figure out another angle and try to get them engaged. And pretty soon, they start telling us that we actually don't know. They would tell us stories. They would tell us what they know about the community, and they actually become very important informants or informative on their community. And then we encourage them. We say, "You know things we don't know." Right? It's not that we know everything, you don't know anything. So we're in a partnership. We are on an equal basis. We're talking, and it takes a little time to overcome this kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting to hear that you also encounter similar sets of problems in apathy in your course of your work in Taiwan.
Sure.
So this may not be an issue that is specific to Singapore after all.
No, I don't think it is.
So on that note, would you have any lessons that you would like to share from your experiences in Taiwan in developing participatory planning processes, specifically for cities like Singapore?
Well, I think the difference between the two places or two societies, one big difference is really exterior. It doesn't have too much to do with people's lives. It has to do with policy about land. Right? Your land is by and large public. Our land is by and large private. That is a huge difference in how people relate to space. Right? So when we do participation in Taiwan, people mostly tend to think about their property value first. And it's a very difficult process to try to get people to think about other things. Right? I don't know what it's like here when you try to engage people, but I suspect that it is slightly different in how people perceive their relationship to space. I think there are certain similarities, and here I would say, I sort of put it into quotation marks, what we call Asian values, right? The fact that we emphasize and we put value on social, family, group, social relationships, right? This is more Asian. So in Taiwan, big deal, family, right? And I'm sure in Singapore, big deal, family life, family gatherings, relationship between people, friends, things like that. So on that score, on that level, I think participation, maybe there's some steps or some ways of dealing with that in Taiwan that we can also try to use here in Singapore. For example, I try to tell my students several, I mentioned in the talk actually. One is about culture, one is about empathy, and one is about telling stories. Right? Empathy simply means, how do I understand you? Right? Now, Asian people, in contrast with Western people, have a different way of relating to each other, so that sometimes you don't necessarily rely on words, right, or language. It might be body language, right? It might be facial expression. It may be the food we eat together, right? How we eat food together. Things that you normally don't think as communication, but it's communicating. And it allows you to see the problem from another person's point of view. And that is very important for participation. And I think in the Asian context, I think in Taiwan, in Singapore, in Malaysia, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, in China, that aspect of it, I think there is some commonality. I think the telling of stories, there's some commonality. Because, at least in my experience, in Taiwan, you go to a community, if you just find some old person, and if you lead them the proper way, they'll start talking, and they won't stop. They just talk, and they tell you all kinds of stories. And we use a lot of that to make the community come together. Because as they're talking, telling old stories, one is that other old people will jump in, and they'll either disagree or agree, quite often. They say, oh no, it wasn't like that. In the old time, it was like this. And pretty soon everybody's talking about that period, or that incident, or that some event, right? And we use that a lot to try to clear up some historical thing that might be important. The other use of telling stories is that young people, in the presence of this, suddenly they hear all kinds of new things about their community that they haven't heard about before. And they get interested and they get excited, right? And then they would go home and ask old people in their house, and grandpa and something, and say, hey, grandpa, was it like that? And the grandpa would say, no, it wasn't like that. And he would telling a different story. But in any case, stories that young people have not heard about. This is very important for getting young people involved in participatory planning. Because next time we do a workshop, all the kids start coming, right? Because they heard these stories and they want to know the next thing that's happening. So I feel that there are important aspects that we have some similarity, commonalities. And that's at a cultural level, almost at a daily cultural level, right? And this part of it is important to participation. Yeah.
And with that, I would like to thank Professor Liu for sharing with us your stories. Thank you.
Okay.